I thought I had one. No, I knew I had one. The way Daniel looked at me that day in court, the barely concealed heartbreak beneath his cold exterior, told me everything I needed to know. He could pretend all he wanted that he was over it, that he had moved on, but deep down I knew he was still clinging to what we used to be. That's why, when the judge ruled in my favor, giving me rights to the summer cabin as part of the settlement, I had to stop myself from smirking. It was almost too easy. Daniel had built that place with his own 2 hands, pouring every spare dollar and weekend into turning that rundown old structure into a perfect lakeside retreat. I used to admire that about him, his work ethic, his stubborn pride, but eventually it just became exhausting. He spent more time on that damn cabin than he did on me, on our marriage. So really it was only fair that I got to keep it in the end. I deserved something for the years I wasted playing the doting wife while he obsessed over building his legacy in the woods. I didn't waste any time. As soon as the paperwork cleared, I planned the trip. My new husband Matthew thought it was a brilliant idea. A chance to show the kids my roots, as he put it, as if I had ever been some nature-loving, off-the-grid type. But I went along with it, eager to see Daniel's face when he realized that I was claiming what was mine. I could already picture it. Him showing up, furious, ready to argue, only to have me remind him sweetly and legally that there was nothing he could do. Cry in court, Danny. The drive up felt like stepping back into a past life, the familiar winding roads lined with dense pine trees, the sharp scent of fresh lake air drifting through the open windows. The kids, Matthew's kids technically, but they had started calling me Mom, chattered in the back seat, excited for a weekend of swimming and roasting marshmallows. Matthew's hand rested on my thigh as he drove, his confident grip a reassuring reminder that I had traded up. Daniel was predictable, quiet, brooding in that way that once seemed deep but later just felt cold. Matthew was warm, expressive, successful. He bought me things. He worshipped me. And most importantly, he wasn't Daniel. But as we turned the final corner onto the dirt path leading to the cabin, something was off. I sat up straighter, my sunglasses sliding down my nose as my eyes adjusted to what I was seeing. The cabin was gone. Well, not gone. But it wasn't what I remembered. The rustic, charming retreat Daniel had spent years perfecting had been transformed into something else entirely. The old wooden beams, the handcrafted shutters, the wraparound porch, they were all gone, replaced by sleek modern architecture that looked straight out of a luxury real estate magazine. Glass walls reflected the shimmering lake. An expansive deck stretched over the water, and multiple stories towered above the land that once held a simple one-bedroom getaway. What the hell? I breathed, my stomach twisting. Matthew whistled lowly. This is some upgrade. Are you sure this is the right place? Of course I was sure. I had spent countless weekends here. I had stormed out of this place after one too many fights, walked barefoot on the dock during sunrise, made love to Daniel in the tiny bedroom upstairs. This was our place. My place. And yet I didn't recognize it. We pulled up to the front, gravel crunching under the tires, and before I could even unbuckle, the front door swung open. My breath caught in my throat as Daniel stepped out onto the porch. But it wasn't the Daniel I expected. He wasn't the man who had slumped in his chair during the divorce hearings, who had looked like he had lost everything when I walked out of his life. He wasn't the man who once begged me to talk, to try to stay. No, the man in front of me was different. His broad frame was relaxed, casual, but there was something unnerving about how still he stood. His blue eyes, once soft and full of emotion, were unreadable, locked onto mine with a level of control that sent a strange ripple down my spine. He looked confident, unbothered. I forced a smirk, stepping out of the car. Well, you've been busy. Daniel didn't move, didn't speak right away. He just tilted his head slightly, studying me like I was something to be observed rather than greeted. And then finally he spoke, his voice smooth and calm. Thought I'd make some improvements. Matthew stepped beside me, hand on my lower back in a possessive gesture, but I hardly noticed. My mind was racing, calculating. What did this mean? Why did the cabin look like this? I owned it. It was mine. I have to say, I continued, keeping my tone light and teasing, I didn't expect you to renovate my place. Daniel's lips twitched, the faintest hint of amusement ghosting across his face. Your place. Something about the way he said it made my stomach twist again. I hated that feeling. Hated that he wasn't giving me what I expected. Anger, frustration, even pain. I squared my shoulders. You know what the settlement said, Daniel. This is legally mine now. So, I hope you don't mind that we'll be staying for the weekend. For a moment he just looked at me. Then to my utter shock he smiled. Not a forced bitter smile but a slow, knowing smirk that sent a shiver down my spine. Oh, he said casually, stepping aside and gesturing toward the house. By all means, make yourself at home. There was something in his voice I didn't like. Something I couldn't quite place. And as I stepped past him into what I thought was my cabin, I had the sinking realization that I had made a mistake. A big one. At the moment I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. This wasn't the cozy lakeside retreat Daniel and I had spent years coming to. The warm rustic charm was gone, replaced by sleek modern luxury. The walls were no longer wood-paneled but smooth, painted in muted, expensive-looking tones. The old stone fireplace had been replaced with a sleek, built-in gas one, and the kitchen, where I had once stood barefoot, drinking coffee while Daniel cooked breakfast, was now a state-of-the-art culinary masterpiece with marble countertops and high-end appliances. It didn't feel like home. It didn't even feel like a cabin. Matthew let out a low whistle. Damn, this is nice. I was expecting something a little more. I don't know, rustic. I swallowed hard, forcing a smile. Yeah, Daniel always did have a habit of overdoing things. Daniel walked in behind us, his presence unsettlingly calm. He wasn't gloating. He wasn't throwing his success in my face. If anything, he looked mildly entertained, as if watching me try to make sense of everything was the highlight of his evening. The kids ran past us, their excited voices echoing through the high ceilings. Mom! This place is awesome! Tommy, the older one, shouted. Can we pick our rooms? Lily added, already bounding up the floating staircase. Daniel leaned against the wall, arms crossed. You might want to check with your mom on that. I narrowed my eyes at him. They can pick whatever room they want. I snapped, more out of irritation than anything else. Matthew gave me a confused glance. Babe, are you okay? You're acting weird. I turned to him, plastering on my best reassuring smile. I'm fine. Just surprised. I didn't expect it to look so different. Daniel chuckled under his breath. You should have stopped by sooner then. I ignored him, setting my purse on the counter and forcing myself to focus. This was fine. This was still my cabin. The paperwork was clear. It didn't matter what Daniel had done to it. He had no claim to it anymore. So, how long are you staying? He asked, his voice maddeningly casual. Just the weekend, I replied quickly. A little getaway for the family. Something flickered in his eyes at the word family, but it was gone before I could fully register it. Well, he said, pushing off the wall, make yourself comfortable. He glanced toward the hallway. Oh, and I wouldn't go into the master suite if I were you. My stomach tightened. Why? Daniel shrugged, heading toward the door. Just a suggestion. I waited until the front door closed behind him before turning to Matthew. Can you believe that? Matthew frowned. I don't know. He seems different. I scoffed. That's because he's trying to get under my skin. He thinks if he acts all smug and mysterious, I'll freak out. Are you freaking out? I straightened my shoulders. Of course not. But as I made my way toward the master bedroom, my pulse quickened. Something about the way Daniel had said it, so casual, so confident, made me uneasy. I reached for the door handle and turned it. The moment I stepped inside, the air left my lungs. This wasn't a bedroom. Not anymore. The room had been gutted and transformed into something else entirely. An office, a study, a place of work. Dark wood bookshelves lined the walls, filled with neatly arranged files and books. A large mahogany desk sat in the center, its surface impeccably clean except for a single framed document. I stepped closer, my heels clicking against the hardwood floor. And then I saw it. The deed. My hands trembled as I picked it up, scanning the page, my eyes darting over the familiar address. The words blurred together as my mind tried to process them. Owner Daniel Carter. No. No. This wasn't possible. I dug through the papers on the desk, flipping through legal documents, scanning signatures. My signature. A sale agreement. A finalized transfer. My knees nearly gave out. I had sold the cabin. I didn't remember doing it, but the paperwork was right in front of me, and my signature was unmistakable. The realization hit me like a sledgehammer. Daniel hadn't just renovated the cabin. He owned it. He must have bought it back, probably for pennies, when I was too distracted by my new life to care about the details. My breathing turned shallow. I had walked in here smug and victorious, thinking I had taken something from him. But Daniel had been playing a different game all along. And he had already won my fingers dug into the edges of the paper, my vision swimming as I reread the words over and over again, desperate to find some mistake, some loophole. But there was none. Daniel owned the cabin. No, not the cabin. The estate, because that's what it was now, a sleek modern home worth more than it ever had been when we were together. My breath came in short, panicked bursts. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. I was supposed to be standing here, triumphant, rubbing my new life in his face while he fumed on the sidelines, powerless. But instead I was the one standing in shock, feeling the floor drop out from under me. I didn't even hear Matthew come in until his voice snapped me back to reality. "Babe? What's wrong?" His footsteps slowed as he took in the office, his eyes flicking from the bookshelves to the desk, finally landing on the paper in my hands. "What's that?" I swallowed, forcing my voice to stay calm. "Just paperwork. Nothing important." I started to fold the document, but Matthew reached for it before I could stop him. His brow furrowed as he scanned the words, his jaw tightening with every passing second. "What the hell is this?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. "You sold the cabin?" His tone was sharp now, demanding. "Megan, how is that even possible? The settlement gave it to you." My mouth opened but no words came out. 'Cause I didn't know. I had no memory of selling it, of signing anything. But my name was right there in ink, dated nearly a year ago. A year. Long enough for Daniel to plan all of this, long enough for him to make every calculated move, while I was too busy basking in my supposed victory. "This isn't right." I finally managed to say, my voice shaking. "I don't remember selling it." Matthew let out a frustrated breath, rubbing his temple. "Then how do you explain this?" He waved the paper in front of me. "Did you even read what you were signing?" Heat flushed through me, a mix of humiliation and anger. Of course I did. I must have been tricked. Maybe it was hidden in some other paperwork, something from the lawyers. But even as I said it, I knew how pathetic it sounded. This was my signature. No one had forced my hand. Matthew scoffed, shaking his head. Unbelievable. I turned away from him, forcing myself to think. I needed answers, and I knew exactly where to get them. Without another word, I stormed out of the office, marching through the house and out onto the deck, where Daniel was standing, gazing out at the lake like he didn't have a care in the world. He barely reacted when I approached, only turning his head slightly when I spat out his name. "Daniel." He glanced at me, a slow smirk forming. "Enjoying your stay?" My hands clenched into fists. "What the hell is this?" I waved the deed at him, my voice rising. "How did you do this?" His expression didn't change. If anything, he looked amused. "Do what?" "Don't play dumb." I snapped. "I never sold this place. I would remember signing it over." He let out a soft chuckle, shaking his head as if he almost felt bad for me. "You really don't remember, do you?" My stomach twisted. I hated how calm he was, how in control he seemed. "Remember what?" He exhaled slowly, as if debating whether to humor me. And then in that maddeningly smooth voice he said, "You were drowning in debt, Megan. The legal fees, the new house, the lifestyle. It all caught up, didn't it? And you needed a way out." My breath hitched. "No, that wasn't. You reached out to me," he continued. His blue eyes locked onto mine, pinning me in place. "Said you didn't want to sell to a stranger, that it should at least stay in the family. So I made you an offer." My heart pounded against my ribs. "That's not true, isn't it?" He tilted his head. "You signed it, Megan. No one forced you. You even thanked me for making the process easy." My mind raced, digging through memories, searching for something, anything that could prove he was lying. But there was nothing. Just a blank space where there should have been certainty. I shook my head violently. "No. You tricked me. You manipulated me into this." His smirk widened. "Did I? Or did you just not care enough to read the fine print?" The blood drained from my face. I felt sick. I felt exposed. This entire trip, this whole weekend had been a trap. and I had walked right into it, thinking I was the one in control. But Daniel had been steps ahead the whole time, waiting for the moment I would finally realize just how badly I had lost. I couldn't breathe. My chest was tight, my mind was spinning, and Daniel was just standing there, watching me unravel with that insufferable smirk still on his face. He had set this up. All of it. The calm demeanor, the renovations, the way he let me waltz in here thinking I still owned this place. It had all been part of his game. And I had played right into his hands. "You're lying," I hissed, but even I could hear the weakness in my voice. Daniel raised an eyebrow, crossing his arms. "You keep telling yourself that if it helps, Megan. But the truth is right in front of you. You don't own this place." "I do." I wanted to argue, to scream, but I couldn't because deep down I knew he was right. I had been careless, too caught up in my new life with Matthew to bother paying attention to the details. The settlement had given me the cabin, but I had been so focused on proving I had one that I never thought about what would happen next. The legal fees had piled up. The expenses of starting over in a new home, a new life, had drained me faster than I ever imagined. And when I had been desperate enough to find a solution, Daniel had been right there offering me a way out, just not the way I had thought. Matthew stepped forward, his face dark with anger. "So what? You've just been waiting for this moment? To humiliate her?" Daniel didn't even look at him. His eyes were locked onto mine, waiting for me to say something, to admit that I had done this to myself. "She's the one who showed up acting like she still owned the place," he said smoothly. "All I did was let her figure out the truth on her own." I clenched my jaw, heat rising in my cheeks. "If you think I'm just going to pack up and leave, you're wrong." "Oh, I know you won't," Daniel replied casually, finally breaking eye contact to glance at his watch. "But I wonder how long you'll want to stay once the guests start arriving." My stomach dropped. "What guests?" Daniel didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled his phone from his pocket, tapped the screen a few times, then held it up for me to see. A text message thread. "Daniel. Everything set up? Unknown number. Yeah. Everyone should be arriving soon. Can't wait to see the look on her face." My blood ran cold. "Who is that?" Daniel slid the phone back into his pocket. "Let's just say, there are some people very interested in seeing what's become of this place." I felt my hands tremble. "Daniel, what did you do?" But he was already stepping past me, walking toward the house with that same unbearable confidence. "Make yourself comfortable, Megan," he called over his shoulder. "After all, you're about to have company." My breath came in quick, panicked gasps as I turned to Matthew, who looked just as confused as I felt. "We need to go," he said firmly. But I shook my head. No, I wasn't going to run. Not yet. Not until I knew what Daniel had planned. Because whatever was about to happen next, I had a sinking feeling that it was going to be worse than anything he had already done. The sound of tires crunching on gravel sent a jolt of panic through me. I turned toward the driveway, my breath catching as the first car pulled in, followed by another. And another. My fingers dug into my palms as I watched people step out. People I recognized. People who had no business being here. My sister Emily. My ex-best friend Claire. Two of Daniel's old college buddies. A few distant relatives from his side of the family. Even Daniel's smug lawyer, the same one who had sat across from me during the divorce proceedings, looking bored while my life unraveled. My throat tightened. This wasn't just a gathering. This was an ambush. "Megan." Emily's voice was full of forced cheer as she strolled toward me, her eyes flicking toward Daniel before settling back on me. "I have to say I was surprised when I got the invite. But I guess you and Daniel are finally on good terms again." I barely heard her. My pulse was pounding in my ears. My gaze snapped to Daniel, who was standing on the deck, watching me with that same maddening calmness. He had planned this. Every single part of it. He had made sure to invite every person in my life who had seen my downfall, every person who had taken sides, his side. Claire approached next, her arms crossed, smirking in a way that made my skin crawl. "Wow, Megan. You didn't tell me you were throwing a housewarming party. Must have slipped your mind, huh?" My nails bit into my palms. I turned to Daniel, my voice low, shaking. "Why?" He tilted his head slightly, as if amused by the question. "You spent so much time making it seem like this place was yours. I figured it was only fair for everyone to see the truth. The humiliation hit like a slap to the face. My eyes burned, my chest tightened, but I refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. Not here. Not now. Matthew stepped beside me, his hand on my arm. We're leaving. But before we could move, Daniel let out a slow, deliberate sigh. That's too bad, he said. I was just about to open a bottle of wine. You know, Megan, the one from our honeymoon. The one you always said was too special to drink. My stomach turned. He still had it? That damn bottle we had bought in Italy, the one I had insisted we save for a milestone, a moment that truly mattered. And now he was using it as part of his little show. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab that bottle and smash it against the floor. But instead I forced a tight smile. Enjoy your little party, I spat. But don't think for a second that this is over. Daniel's smirk widened just slightly. Oh, Megan, he said softly. It was over before you even got here. I turned on my heel and stormed toward the car, Matthew following close behind. But as I reached for the door handle, I heard Emily's voice behind me, quiet but sharp. You should have never left him. My grip tightened. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Because deep down, a small, infuriating part of me wondered if she was right. The drive back to the hotel was silent, except for the sound of my own breathing, shallow and uneven. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, my entire body rigid with rage. Matthew hadn't said a word since we left, but I could feel his anger radiating beside me. His jaw clenched, fingers tapping impatiently on his thigh. Finally, he exhaled sharply. What the hell was that, Megan? I didn't answer. I couldn't. My mind was still spinning, replaying every second of that humiliation, every smug glance, every knowing smirk, every goddamn laugh at my expense. You didn't sell the cabin, huh? Matthew scoffed, shaking his head. Didn't read the fine print? Are you kidding me? How careless can you be? My grip tightened on the wheel. I don't need this right now. No, you do, he snapped. Because I just stood there, watching your ex-husband parade you around like a fool in front of everyone you know. And for what? A house? Some stupid power move? Jesus, Megan, you're smarter than this. My teeth clenched. I said, I don't need this right now. Well, too bad, he shot back. Because I'm stuck in the middle of this mess with you. You dragged me here thinking you were going to rub your success in his face. And instead you walked right into a goddamn trap. I slammed my foot on the brakes, the car jerking to a stop on the side of the road. I turned to face him, my chest heaving. You think I don't know that? You think I don't feel like a complete idiot right now? Matthew ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. So what now? I swallowed hard, my mind racing. I didn't know. I didn't have a plan. I had gone there expecting to be the one in control, and instead I had been blindsided. But I wasn't going to just let Daniel win. Not like this. We go back, I said, my voice firm. Matthew's brows shot up. Are you insane? We go back, I repeated, forcing the words through gritted teeth. I don't care what Daniel thinks he's won. He wants to embarrass me? Fine. Let him have his little moment. But I am not running away like some defeated ex-wife. That place was mine, and I will not let him make me feel like I don't belong there. Matthew let out a humorless laugh. You don't belong there, Megan. Legally, financially, emotionally, you don't. The words stung more than I wanted to admit. But my pride, my anger, my sheer unwillingness to let Daniel have the last word burned hotter. I'm going back, I said again, my voice shaking but determined. You can come with me or you can check out of this whole thing. But I am not letting him have this. Matthew stared at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he sighed, rubbing his temple. Unbelievable, he muttered. Fine. But when this blows up in your face again, don't expect me to pick up the pieces. I turned back to the wheel, my heart pounding as I pressed my foot against the gas, the car lurching forward. I didn't care what Matthew thought. I didn't care what anyone thought. Daniel might have been playing the long game, but he didn't know one thing. I wasn't done playing yet. The sky had darkened by the time we pulled back up to the cabin, the soft glow of lights spilling from the massive windows onto the driveway. The party was still going, laughter and music floating through the air like some cruel reminder of my humiliation. I killed the engine, my fingers gripping the steering wheel as I stared at the house, every nerve in my body thrumming with adrenaline. Matthew let out an exasperated sigh beside me. Megan, this is stupid. What are you even planning to do? Walk in there and demand they leave. I ignored him, pushing open the car door and stepping out before I could overthink it. The cool night air did nothing to soothe the fire raging inside me. I marched toward the house, my heels clicking against the stone path, my pulse hammering in my ears. The moment I stepped inside, the laughter died down, and every pair of eyes turned toward me. Daniel was leaning against the kitchen island, a glass of whiskey in his hand, watching me with that same maddening smirk. Back so soon, he mused. Couldn't stay away? I forced a smile, ignoring the way my heart clenched at the smug satisfaction in his tone. Just thought I'd come back and enjoy my own party. A few people chuckled under their breath, and I could feel my nails biting into my palms. Claire, standing near the fireplace with a glass of wine, raised an eyebrow. Your party? Megan, sweetie, I think you're confused. My smile tightened. Am I? 'Cause last I checked I was invited here. Or was that just part of Daniel's little show? Daniel took a slow sip of his drink, his gaze locked onto mine. You tell me. You're the one who walked in here acting like you owned the place. My blood boiled. I knew what he was doing, keeping his tone casual, making me look like the unhinged one. But I wasn't going to let him have the upper hand. You think this is funny? I asked, my voice dangerously low. Setting me up? Embarrassing me in front of everyone? Daniel tilted his head slightly, considering. I think what's funny is how you showed up so sure of yourself, so confident you had one. But you never even realized the game had already ended. A murmur rippled through the room, a mixture of amusement and discomfort. I clenched my fists. You always needed to be in control, didn't you? I snapped. Even now, after everything, you couldn't just let it go. Daniel exhaled slowly, setting his glass down on the counter. Let it go. His voice was soft, but there was something razor-sharp beneath it. You took everything from me, Megan. You walked away, you humiliated me, you flaunted your new life in my face, and then... He let out a short, humorless laugh. You thought you could come back here and take the one thing I had left. My breath caught in my throat. For the first time that night, his mask slipped and I saw it, the flicker of pain of something deeper than just revenge. But just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by that same infuriating calm. So no, he continued. I didn't let it go. And neither did you, apparently. Silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. I could feel every set of eyes on me, waiting to see what I would do, what I would say. But I had nothing. Because for the first time, I wasn't sure if I was the one who had really won after all. I hated him. I hated the way he stood there, composed and smug, like he had already decided the outcome of this entire night. I hated the way everyone around us was watching like this was some kind of spectacle. A final act in a play that only I hadn't realized I was a part of. But more than anything, I hated the fact that for a brief, fleeting second, I had seen something real in his eyes. Something raw, something that almost made me feel guilty. Almost. I forced a laugh, shaking my head as I folded my arms across my chest. You really think this is a victory for you? I asked, letting my voice drip with condescension. That standing here in your little house, throwing your petty party, somehow makes up for everything? Daniel didn't flinch, didn't react. He just studied me, his expression unreadable. It's not about winning or losing, Megan. That's where you always got it wrong. It's about who still has something left when the dust settles. My stomach twisted. And you think that's you? He gave a slow, deliberate shrug. I know it is. Something about his certainty made my pulse spike with fury. You think because you bought back a house you have the upper hand? I stepped closer, my voice lowering. Let me tell you something, Daniel. You can have your little revenge fantasy, you can throw your pathetic party, you can smirk all you want, but at the end of the day I moved on. I left. And no matter how much you try to rewrite the past, you're still the one standing in a house full of people you barely talk to anymore, pretending this is some grand win. His jaw tightened just slightly, the only crack in his otherwise perfect composure. Good. I had touched a nerve. But before I could push further, before I could sink the knife in deeper, he smiled again. And that was worse. You know what's funny, Megan? He mused, his voice almost thoughtful. You keep saying you moved on. You keep insisting that I'm the one stuck in the past. He leaned in just slightly, just enough for his next words to be meant only for me. And yet, you're the one who came back. The air in the room felt thick, suffocating. I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Because he was right. I had come back. I had walked into this house expecting something. What exactly, I didn't even know anymore. A final word? A final victory? Proof that he still cared? I had wanted something from him, even if it was just the satisfaction of watching him suffer. But Daniel hadn't suffered. He had thrived. And I was the one standing here, grasping at something I couldn't even name. You don't know anything about me. I finally managed, my voice cold. Daniel just smiled, taking a slow sip of his drink before setting it down. That's the thing, Megan, he murmured. I know everything about you. I always have. My throat tightened, a rush of memories slamming into me all at once. Our late-night talks, the way he used to anticipate my thoughts before I even spoke them. The way he could read me better than anyone else ever had. The way, even now, even after everything, he still had the ability to make me feel like I was standing on unsteady ground. I took a shaky breath, forcing myself to look away. This was a mistake, I muttered. Daniel didn't stop me. He didn't say another word. He just watched as I turned and walked away, his silence following me all the way out the door. The cold air hit me the moment I stepped outside, but it did nothing to stop the fire burning under my skin. My hands were shaking, my breath uneven, and no matter how many times I told myself that I didn't care, that Daniel meant nothing to me, that this night didn't matter, I knew I was lying. I stormed toward the car, barely aware of Matthew trailing behind me. Megan, he called, but I didn't stop. Megan, would you just? His hand caught my arm, yanking me to a stop. What the hell was that? I spun around, yanking my arm free. What do you think it was? I snapped. That smug bastard set me up, and I wasn't going to stand there and let him have the last word. Matthew let out a short, humorless laugh. Oh, he had the last word, Megan. And you let him. You walked right into that house like you had something to prove. And instead you proved exactly what he wanted. You're not over him. My jaw clenched. That's not true. Isn't it? He stepped closer, his voice lowering. Because from where I was standing, it sure as hell looked like you still care. I swallowed hard, the words slicing through me in a way I wasn't prepared for. You don't know what you're talking about. Matthew exhaled sharply, shaking his head. You know what? I don't even care anymore. This whole weekend has been one massive disaster. You dragged me into this mess, lied about the cabin, humiliated yourself in front of a crowd. And for what? He scoffed. Some pathetic attempt to prove something to your ex? My fists clenched. You didn't have to come. Oh, trust me, I know, he shot back. Because I wouldn't have if I had known what this was really about. The accusation hung between us, heavy and suffocating. I lifted my chin. You're overreacting. Matthew barked out a laugh, stepping back. You know what, Megan? I don't think I am. He pulled his keys from his pocket, shaking his head. I'm done with this. I'm done with you. My stomach twisted. What? I'm leaving, he said simply, unlocking the car. You want to stay here and obsess over Daniel? Be my guest. But I'm not playing this game anymore. Panic surged in my chest. Matthew, don't be ridiculous. He let out a sharp breath, shaking his head. No, you don't get to tell me what's ridiculous. You don't get to drag me into your mess, and then pretend like I'm the problem. He opened the car door, looking at me one last time. You and Daniel deserve each other. And then, without another word, he got in and drove away, the red glow of his taillights disappearing down the road. I stood there, the night air freezing against my skin, my mind blank. I should have been angry. I should have been hurt. But all I felt was nothing. Because the truth was, I didn't care that Matthew had left. I didn't care about any of it. All I could think about was Daniel. And I hated myself for it. I don't know how long I stood there, watching the empty road where Matthew had disappeared. The night was eerily silent now. No more laughter spilling from the house. No more voices mocking me from inside. Just me, the cold air, and the unbearable weight of everything I refused to admit. I should have left. I should have gotten in a cab, booked a flight home, done anything except what I did next. I turned around and walked back toward the house. My heart was pounding, every step heavier than the last, but my feet carried me forward anyway, like they already knew the truth before I was willing to face it. The door was still open when I stepped inside, and the party was winding down, people murmuring in low voices, gathering their things, throwing me quick glances before looking away. They had seen enough of my humiliation for one night. I didn't care. The only person I cared about was still standing where I left him, leaning lazily against the kitchen island, watching me like he knew I'd be back. Maybe he did. Maybe I did too. I closed the distance between us, every nerve in my body screaming at me to turn around, to walk away, to stop this before it was too late. But I didn't. You planned all of this, I said, my voice quieter than I intended. Daniel tilted his head slightly, eyes flicking over my face. Did I? My jaw clenched. Don't play dumb. You knew exactly how this would go. You knew I would come back here thinking I still had control, thinking I could win. His lips curled into the faintest smirk. And yet here you are. The words sent a shiver down my spine. I hated how calm he was, how effortlessly he unraveled me without even trying. Why? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Why go through all of this? The party, the guests, the cabin, why set me up like this? Daniel exhaled slowly, setting his drink down on the counter, his gaze locking onto mine. Because I wanted you to see, Megan. See what? His expression didn't change. That I don't need you anymore. The words hit harder than I expected. I forced out a sharp laugh, shaking my head. Bullshit. His eyes darkened, but he didn't deny it. Instead, he leaned in slightly, just enough that I could smell the faint trace of whiskey on his breath. You keep telling yourself that, he murmured. But you came back. Not me. My breath caught in my throat. I came back because I wasn't going to let you win. He studied me for a long moment, the tension between us thick, suffocating. Then slowly he shook his head. You came back because you didn't want it to be over. My pulse hammered in my ears. I wanted to argue, to deny it, to throw some cutting remark back in his face, but I couldn't. Because we both knew the truth. It had never really been over. Not for me. Maybe not for him either. And that realization was the cruelest part of all.